And now we come to our keynote roundtable. I'd like Chris to come back, Dimitri, Karrie, and Paolo. Thank you for being with us today. Dimitri and Paolo are our two honorees, and I'm delighted that Karrie also was able to join us at this top-level roundtable. And Karrie, I understand soon you're going to be at the head of the UK Chamber of Shipping. So, in addition to your industry role, you're going to have a very significant institutional footprint.
Okay. Thank you very much, Nicholas. I have to tell you, this is a dynamite panel. We are very, very fortunate this morning, I guess, to basically bring the A-team of shipping. This is a group that has accomplished so much. It's well respected. Their leadership really enters the room before they do, and there's so much horsepower here that can influence impactful change, and we're going to talk a little bit about that because I think as we've all essentially heard over the course of the morning, you know, we're more or less in the early innings of a decade of change. This is to some extent a new world for us. We've got new languages of shipping, whether it's CO2 reduction per ton mile, or if you're a weld-awake fan, it's grams per CO2 equivalents per megajoules. New boundary conditions, safety, availability, scalability of fuels infrastructure, new global shipping shapers. We didn't talk a lot about geopolitical instability, but it's still there on top of everything else. I know we're spending a lot of time on regulations. But we've got shipbuilding capacity concerns and, of course, regulatory clarity. So we're going to try to bring all that together here this morning and get a sense from this group here how they navigate through this relative to the challenges and opportunities we have. So I know they don't need any introductions, but I am going to introduce them. Mr. Paolo D'Amico, Chairman of INTERTANKO from 2018 to 2024, and obviously Chairman of D'Amico International Shipping. Ms. Karrie Trauth, Executive Vice President of Shipping and Maritime for Shell, Vice President of UK Chamber of Shipping, and incoming President of UK Chamber of Shipping, I think in March of next year. And of course, a classmate of mine, Dimitrios Fafalios, Chairman of INTERCARGO from 2019 to 2024, and President and Director of Fafalios Shipping. So what you see here, and Secretary of the Board of Directors for the Union of Greek Shipowners. So what you have here is essentially a really interesting blend of leaders that are impacting associations as well as shipowners that really have a real sense and live kind of at the deck plate level pretty much every day. So I'm going to go ahead and start by just asking, we've got a bunch of questions, we'll get to them, but kind of what's your take on where we are and where we're going? Karrie, I'll start with you.
Well, I'm going to hit the microphone first. I'm going to take from the last panel and start with people. Because indeed in 2021, ICS and BIMCO, sorry to steal that, but ICS and BIMCO did a study on the health of our seafarers and saw a really significant shortage of credentialed seafarers. That report in 2021 estimated that by 2026, we would have a shortage of 90,000 credentialed seafarers worldwide. This scares me. In a world where we ask more and more of our seafarers as the digital tools come in and perhaps actually make the job a little bit more difficult on board the ships, as the challenges of decarbonization and indeed as shipping becomes more visible in a geopolitics way and in a conflict way, I worry about attracting, recruiting, training, and retaining our seafarers. So I know that's entirely off topic for what you want today, but that's what's got my mind right now.
Safety is synonymous with people, with seafarers. And safety is the mantra of our business, so very, very timely. Dimitri?
Chris, thank you, and thank you to Capital Link. I think that you mentioned something earlier on, and our biggest challenge is that we have an aspiration, and then we have to actually fulfill that aspiration. And Karrie mentioned one of the ways that we can fulfill the aspiration is to have enough well-trained, well-paid seafarers. We also have to understand realities, and realities are that we must decarbonize, we must become more sustainable, but we have to do this in a way that is practical and that respects shipping's two major economic models, and that would be the liner model and the tramp model. And this is actually a very, very large mountain to climb because we have to work with our regulators to provide the most effective way of getting from where we are to where we need to be. We have nearly 70,000 large cargo ships in the world fleet today. And those ships are not going to suddenly, overnight, become, I don't know what to say anymore, green methanol burning cargo ships overnight. It's not going to happen. So we have to work through this problem in a practical and pragmatic way. And the way that it's going to be is through the human element at every single stage of this process. Thank you.
Paolo, how about you, from your experience?
You see, I mean, I would say start from a point. The basic problem of this decarbonization is the fact that the first time in shipping history, the rules and regulators are arriving first and technology is arriving later. This is a big problem because in the old days we had technology advancing and rule and regulators adapting to the technology which advanced. Today we are in a really deadlock because we know theoretically what are the fuels we should use, what we should do, but I mean it's pure theory because the economy of scale is not there, the distribution is not there. People are not investing in this fuel because demand is not existing yet. So it's really, I think, a big problem. And in all this, I share totally with Karrie the fact of training of our people. Number one, the shortage of our people, which we still have to fund them enough of them. And the training of them, because we are going to face new products, new systems, and they are totally new from our experience.
You know, Paolo, you're right. I'm going to get to Karrie, but, you know, we have gaps. You know, we have gaps, and a lot of times when you kind of look at the commercial decisions we have to make, we're basically taking decisions against unproven technologies or betting on technology readiness timelines, and you know that's kind of, you know, that's really kind of overshadowing kind of you know, where we go with these regulations to allow us to, you know, put ourselves into as much a position as possible to eliminate uncertainty. But Karrie, let me ask you, you know, we talk a lot about, well, 2030, 2050. A lot of studies are out there, including some from ABS. You know, as I canvassed all the studies, getting to the 2030 targets, it's a safe putt, can get there. 2050, this is where you have differences of opinions. A lot of people say not going to get there. Some people say it's at best a wild card. You know, from where you sit, you have such an interesting, unique perspective. Could you give us kind of a sense of, as you look forward, you know, what do you see relative to 2030, 2050?
Yeah, thanks. And maybe I'll start, Paolo, with what you said, that this is the first time in history that we have rules and regulators ahead of technology. What I can say that we've seen in Shell is that without the demand signal that rules and regulations will create, then it becomes very difficult for a fuel provider to invest in creating that fuel, or presumably for an engine manufacturer or any of the other OEMs outside of those who are working on startup money. So we certainly appreciate the IMO's efforts to give us a pathway to create a global level playing field and not a regional set of structures that everyone tries to work amongst. 2030? I agree, Chris. 2030 is pretty straightforward. The advances we've made in ship design, whether that's the energy efficient technologies, whether it's the operational efficiencies underpinned by digital that we heard in this last panel, and indeed in Stacy's comments, those are moving forward. 2030, not so hard. LNG, which has a carbon intensity roughly of a B30 bioblend for fuel oil. That gets us part of the way as well. Chris, you've referred to that in your comments here and in previous engagements, particularly at LISW. But LNG doesn't get you all the way.
That's right.
LNG is a first step. LNG requires a bioblend, much like the conventional fuels we're seeing today with bioblends, or even a synthetic or e-pathway, which is really what starts to get us closer to 2050, Chris. I think there is a pathway for bioblends in LNG that gets us multiple years. It gets us well into the 2030s and towards the end of the 2030s before you're getting to a significant bioblend, before you're blending more than 15 or 20% with today's regulations, proposed regulations, even if we don't adjust that trajectory.
Yep. Good. Dimitri, how about yourself? What's your bet? What are your bets?
Yeah. I'm very much aligned with Karrie. I was going to quote you all some incredible statistics of the unavailability of the zero and near zero fuels, which is substantial, because remember, we need these fuels to be available to the shipping industry safely and commercially. That means that these green fuels must be surplus to what is required on shore. And this is what many people often forget, is that the core demand for the green fuels will be shore-based, not maritime-based. And again, I go back to this very stark statistic that Clarkson's gives us, which we have 69 to 70,000 large vessels which are not going to disappear overnight. We also, unfortunately, have a set of recycling rules which have made which has made it very, very difficult for us to recycle these ships. So I agree with Karrie. There are many sectors within the fleet, and this is a positive, that have already met their 2030 IMO goals. But the way that we are going to make that practical transition goes to improved efficiency, to biofuels, to onboard carbon capture, to LNG, and to LNG with a combination of some of these technologies. And, you know, on the other hand, we have to be optimistic. And we have some global seaborne trade statistics, and from 2008 until 2024, there are statistics which shows that the trade has grown by 62% in ton miles, whereas the emissions, the greenhouse gas emissions from world shipping, has actually fallen by 15%. So we have to be positive, and we have to be optimistic that we can get to our targets. Let's also just look a tiny amount back into history and say that shipping has improved its carbon intensity over 20 times without a single piece of carbon regulation, a single piece of decarbonization regulation. If you compare to I see Captain Tsakos is here, he will remember the Liberty ships in 1942, 10,000 tons, 10 knots, 32 tons a day. In 2012, we have a Newcastle Max, 210,000 tons, 10 knots on 32 tons a day. So 20 times shipping has improved its carbon efficiency without a single piece of regulation, which is what I go back to my esteemed friend Paolo is saying. Shipping, the market itself drove efficiency. And if you know any ship owner in this room or anywhere in the world that doesn't care about every single drop of every single fuel or lubricant or chemical on board, please point them out, because I haven't met one yet. So we are an incredibly efficient industry. And we also have a lot of positive, good ideas to how we're going to get to 2050. Just that I wish that somebody would listen to them. Thank you.
Right. Paolo, why don't you weigh in on this?
I can just share what Karrie said and what Dimitrios said. Basically, let's remember, when we talk about 2030, we are talking about the existing fleet on the water today. Now, this existing fleet on the water today, for a vast majority, is running on conventional fuels. So, of course, they can mitigate with biofuels, but are they around all this quantity of biofuel that we are going to need? I don't know. I have my doubts. So they can do short-term efficiency adjustment, but we are talking about peanuts. Certainly, as Karrie said, most of the companies are ready for 2030. It's not going to be a problem that is going to be 2050. And Dimitri just said there are 60 to 70,000 ships out there. And let's face it, the great majority of those ships have to be replaced. And anyhow, will be replaced because we are talking 25 years ahead. So we'll put by natural evolving of the fleet will be. But you can imagine to replace 70,000 ships, even in 25 years. I mean, it's not a very. And what is worse, we have to scrap 70,000 ships, and we don't know where we are going to do that. Thank you.
No, I mean, thank you. I mean, it's, you know, you go back to, again, the calculus to get to net zero by 2050. And, you know, we talked a lot about those short-term gains right now relative to energy efficiency, software, performance management, using data, being able to kind of pull that 30 or 35%, or maybe to even some extent 40% out. And, you know, that's the stuff we can control going forward. But when you look outward and you look at this, you know, emerging family of what, it's not even green fuels, I'll say blue and green fuels, and you really then look at the infrastructure, you need the electrolyzers, you need, in other words, you know, you need a future fuel mix to get to 2050 by net zero by 2050 is 70% zero carbon fuels, which means you need 10 times more renewable energy, and 30% of carbon neutral fuels, which need about 100 times more carbon capture. So, so yes, I mean, it is, I think we're thinking as we work our forward, how do we kind of build a ship to kind of get us there? But let me push a little bit more back to safety, but back to the seafarer, and really kind of, and I wanted to kind of bring in something again from the last panel relative to AI, and you know, where do you see the emerging trends? You know, how are you handling crew training and crew learning? Because, you know, in this new world, it's going to be more dynamic fuels rather than static fuels. Probably the talent development equation is not just age, experience, and certification, it's skills and continuous learning. How are you guys pulling that together and preparing yourselves for that point of view? Karrie?
I think for us, in many ways, it starts with that shore-based team, because there's a need to improve and upskill those who run our ships, those who run our technical management operation first. Because as the new tools become available in the office, then we can move to the ship. So if you think, we heard about agentic AI and applying agentic AI, if you don't have a shore-based team, or until we have a shore-based team that can even speak to agentic AI, let alone use it, then it's hard to push to the ships. Flip side, we see a real pull from the ships for simplified tools. I was out on a ship visit in Singapore a few weeks ago, and it was just refreshing to see the intrinsically safe iPad that the crew was using as they walked around the ship, doing things where in the past, Chris, you can imagine this, they would go out, they'd make a note, they'd write it down, they'd do their rounds, they'd have to come back in, enter everything into the computer, which maybe or maybe didn't actually make it into the management database. It was a company-specific proprietary tool, but I think it sounds like some of the things that ABS is working with WaveSight. How do we make for the digital natives that we're recruiting or that we're trying to attract to the industry, how do we make that feel seamless to them? So it's getting the tools in the hands of the seafarers, it's getting gamified learning in the hands of the seafarers as we introduce more challenging, whether it's technology, IT technology, or physical technology. It's making those tools available to our next generations of seafarers while still dealing with those of us who look like us on this panel. So making it not so complex and confusing in a digital way that we turn off when someone starts to talk.
Paolo, I'm going to go to you now, rather. I'm going to mix this up a little bit.
But I mean, we are heavily investing in training through an academy in India, and we have an academy in Italy for the few Italian officers who are left, because Italian officers today, they want to join all the cruise ship, and they certainly don't want to come on a tanker. But investing is the only way. Here again, as I say, the problem itself is not too much the training. The training you can put it down. The problem is the availability of the system. Mm-hmm. This is becoming more, said Karrie before, I mean, it's becoming more and more big problem. I don't know where we are going to end up with that. Anyhow, I think that the first one who has to be trained is the shipowner, because to be frank, with all this technology going around, at least myself, I feel a little bit lost. But say that, I mean, that is the only direction.
So, Dimitri, I'm going to put your MIT education to work here. Tell us kind of where your thoughts are.
Yeah, thank you. I'm fully aligned with Karrie on this issue of training the shoreside people. I think it's vital, but we must really, unfortunately, look into the basics. And at the moment, really the crew training should be improved from top down and from bottom up. And we really have to go back to the STCW at IMO, which, as we know, is under review, and many people will agree that it needs a very fast and quick and effective refresh. And that ties into the merchant marine academies around the world, and the flag and the port states have to embrace the changes that our industry is facing much faster than they've done so far. So in fact, despite the fact that, as Carlo says, we are reliant on our governmental merchant marine academies, ultimately it will fall on the ship owner or the ship operator to carry out what I would call extra, but in fact it's not extra training, it's necessary training. And therefore, the top-down approach will be to improve STCW and the merchant marine schools, and the bottom-up approach is that from the companies themselves to get technology on board, to get software on board, to assist in crew training. And that financial burden will be taken by the ship owners and the ship operators. But just to create a little, again, a little link with the past, we are talking about technology, we're talking about things that we are finding difficult in our generation to understand. If for instance, nuclear power becomes more prevalent, we're going to have to go back. We're going to have to start training steam engineers again. And we don't have any steam engineers. So what we're talking about is we want to push the technological boundary, but at the end of the day, if we're really going to make the big step into nuclear, we're going to have to go back and train old-fashioned, safe steam engineers. Thank you.
So let me kind of pick that up, Karrie, and I know you have a Navy background. Nuclear. Should we be spending more time talking about that? You know, we talk, it's always a little bit of a footnote, it's always an afterthought. We never bring it into the mainstream. Is that something that we should be talking a little bit more about in more open forums?
Well, the first thing I was thinking was my steam quals are going to be useful for something in the future. So good job. And then I was thinking, you must not have LNG carriers, because we still have quite a number of people on steam plants on LNG carriers. When I think about nuclear, my thinking has evolved on this, Chris, over the last few years. When I first heard nuclear proposed maybe 6 years ago, I thought of the way the US Navy does nuclear. We have a 2-year dedicated training program for the enlisted, for the crew who operate the plants, and additional requirements plus an 18-month training just for the nuclear plant for the officers. And so I took a step to try to imagine what that would look like in the merchant navies around the world as we try to upskill and train people, again, from the framework of that US Navy training portfolio. I had the opportunity in late 2021 to speak with the president of Maine Maritime Academy. Maine Maritime Academy has a nuclear training program, so it's one of the merchant marine academies in the US. And I thought that was very interesting that they had a nuclear training program that they're running engineering officer candidates through. Now, most of them go into the civilian nuclear power machine, if you will, industry in the US. But actually, the training programs that they have, it's not quite the same as the Navy, because they're not designing for the same, to use your words, boundary conditions. They're not designing for the same expectations. Yeah. So the training and the additional development suddenly seems not so high a hurdle for me. And that probably had been my biggest hurdle. I still try to imagine an entirely differently designed merchant ship where we would put our cargoes, how we would redesign the ship, but that's the same sort of conversation we would have, and we have had for LNG-fueled vessels, you would have for a hydrogen-fueled vessel. It's some fundamental naval architecture changes to come in the future. But on the training question, I think it's plausible.
Dimitri, you brought up nuclear. Kind of what's your thought relative to the technology, you know, the development of these small modular reactors, you know, very different than kind of the high pressure reactors you see on Navy ships. And, you know, kind of what is that timeline? Obviously, we're talking not a short game, not a mid game, but a long game. But, you know, to get the cost of the electrolyzer down, to get enough carbon capture up, you may be talking a long game there too. So it's possible the two could actually, you know, converge.
Thank you, Chris. And I guess it's a very topical subject, but if we look at it purely from the engineering point of view, it's very doable. What we have to overcome is the regulatory, the many, many regulatory hurdles. And I believe that in this generation, in future generations, I think that these regulatory hurdles can be overcome more easily. I think that there are, if I use a very slang term, there are fewer nuclear hang-ups now and in the future than there were in the past. We literally have to rewrite all of the rules from the beginning, and it's actually happening at the moment at the IMO. I also know that the International Atomic Energy Agency is setting up a group to look specifically at maritime nuclear. I think that we must remain optimistic. I think that we must understand that it really is much better applied to large, powerful vessels, and we can't apply it everywhere. And I think that with these realisms, and I think that, I think that the first nuclear service will be between two nations where there is greater sympathy to nuclear power, and in fact, there's even a case to say we shouldn't even be calling it nuclear power, but we should be calling it something slightly different. But I think that in parallel with all of our efforts to decarbonize, nuclear will play a very important part. Thank you.
Great. Actually, your instincts and intuition going forward were proven actually 2 weeks ago. There's actually the beginning of a nuclear corridor that is being established right now between the UK and the US, similar to a green corridor to start the process. I am going to, because we have such a talent group up here with such great industry representation, such respected and trusted voices in the industry, and just such recognized leadership, I'm actually going to use this time to open the floor up for questions before I give this distinguished group an opportunity to close out. So are there any questions from the audience from this A-team of shipping? That must be either you're hungry, but it is really very rarely do we have, in all the years that I've been doing this, do you have such a skill set up here that both, are essentially ship owners and practitioners of the business, as well as represent industry associations, INTERCARGO, INTERTANKO, UK Shipping. So,
one of the things that I was asking Paolo and Dimitri and of course Karrie, how does the industry cooperate? I mean, Dimitri and Paolo, you were at the helm of major industry organizations, INTERTANKO, INTERCARGO. Karrie, you're now going to be at the, the head of the UK Chamber of Shipping. So how do the organizations work together to put a unified voice to the IMO? And then another question that I had privately asked Karrie, are we running the danger ultimately of seeing different regulations passing all over the world? We have the EU ETS, maybe the IMO is coming with their own. Are we going to have the Chinese do something, or the Americans? I mean, what do you think? So these two questions, if you don't mind.
It already happened, Nicholas. The American, they pull out from many conventions, and we had already that problem. For us, it's the worst problem that we can have, because to run after a number of regulations just in the name of the fact that we are steaming in one place instead of another one is a disaster. Is a real disaster. I mean, I think even the artificial intelligence is going to have a problem. So we hope we in shipping, we are all sponsor of IMO. And IMO is our house. And I would love to see IMO ruling us on whatever it is needed.
Nico, sorry to... we talk about cooperation. I think that cooperation within the industry is very good. And I think that the methods, rather the organizations which represent our industry to the regulators they're incredibly skilled and incredibly knowledgeable. My late father was very honored to be part of the Greek delegation to IMO in 1960. At that time, both MSC, Maritime Safety, and MEPC were basically, there were maritime people in both of the IMO directorates. This has changed. This has changed significantly, and this has made this question of cooperation, of communication, much more difficult. Because whereas the Safety Directorate has retained its maritime expertise, the Environmental Directorate has gone on a different path. And let me just leave it at that. But shipping is very, very good at communicating. Shipping, you yourself know it because you have conferences in every part of the world, and you know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. Shipping is very, very efficient in that. When we come to putting our case to regulators, this is where our challenges are. And this is where the major challenges will be from here until 2050 and beyond. Thank you.
So maybe two things. On the differing regulations, I think I said that, or I alluded to that in my opening, that we need one global playing field, one level global playing field. We need the IMO, our IMO, to be successful. We need to be successful in October. There's going to be an awful lot of hard work after October, assuming we adopt, which I still have optimism for, but we need that. Yep. Because the opposite is a world in which we will all struggle to trade, and a world in which the consumers will then struggle to have, the countries, the nations, and the individuals will struggle to have what we need to survive and thrive. So first one, we need one rule of law, we need one system. And should there be anyone from the EC here, I call on you, please, should the IMO adopt in October, let's start thinking about how to dismantle the EC regulation, or at least weave them in to align with IMO. In thinking about cooperation, we think of the INTERTANKOs, the INTERCARGOs, the OCIMFs, and then the shipping chambers as one place for cooperation. But in many ways, those are representing multiple members with multiple interests. And so I see with the UK Chamber of Shipping a fuel agnostic approach to supporting IMO. I see this in other bodies as well. And to a degree, whether it's fuel, whether it's another topic, agnosticism gets everyone under the same tent, but doesn't necessarily help shape either the conversation or the regulation. Maybe an alternative to that, though, is the Global Maritime Forum and the work that they've done, bringing voices from around the industry together and getting aligned around messaging. So I think of their Getting to Zero coalition, which someone might tell me when it was launched, but that must be 6 or 7 years ago now, at least. And out of that, the Poseidon Principles for insurance, the Sea Cargo Charter, and quite a number of initiatives to drive the message that the industry wants change, and we need help for change. And while perhaps even the Global Maritime Forum isn't bringing all of our voices together to a specific solution. They're bringing our voices together to inspire change and to, from the edges, drive it. So I think there's opportunities for us, whether it's within the various chambers, whether it's through the segment industry bodies, or through communal think tanks, such as the Global Maritime Forum, to continue to find ways to bring our voices together clearly in a non-anti-competitive way, so in a pro-competitive way. I think we can find ways to move the industry forward as we are now, but perhaps even more. Thank you.
Great. Now, listen, I think we talked about it. Collective success is a team sport. And in many ways, the heavy lifting, the ability to work together, really will start in the next 14 months after this, based on all the information that we're putting together. We're running a little bit later, but quick 30-second soundbite. Any particular message you would like to leave the audience here?
For me, I'm going to close where I start. Keep the seafarer in mind. Without the women and men who work for us day in, day out around the globe, our businesses, our industry doesn't exist. So please, their safety, their well-being, and indeed their education, training, and recruitment, keep them in mind. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Karrie. Dimitri?
Thank you. Very simply, sustainability with safety. Safety, safety, safety. We've talked a lot about safety today. Safety goes into every aspect of our business, but we cannot be sustainable without being safe. And that's the plain fact. Thank you.
Okay. Paolo?
I would like to address to the people who are not involved in shipping. Maybe they are not here, but I mean, don't think that we are lazy, don't think that shipping is slow. We are facing a lot of obstacles, structural ones. So we have lack of fuels, new fuels. We have lack of infrastructure. If we capture the CO2 on board, we have to unload it somewhere. But if a terminal are not ready to receive it, we cannot do it. So there is an infrastructure. And we are talking of billions and billions of dollars to do this change. So we are there, we are prepared to act, but we must have a possibility to do it in a reasonable way. Thank you.
Thank you. Listen, can you give a round of applause for such